This crazy guy, only 16 years old and well overweight, in his first journey, ascended to an almost divine level, flaunting over 100 trillion points in his inventory. He became invincible to the point that a single arrow of his could summon a colossal electric dragon that wiped everything on the battlefield. But to reach this overwhelming power, he had to suffer a lot in life. Seeger came into the world in a body. Let's just say aesthetics weren't on his side. He looked like a walking meme. But the guy's self-confidence was absurd. He had an almost mystical pride in his own ugliness, like it was a medal. He was constantly the butt of jokes, of course. But after all, no one chooses their cradle, only their path. With the typical stubbornness of those who don't let themselves be brought down, he kept going strong selling trinkets, even with bosses giving him dirty looks. Despite being completely ignored by the female public, he lived life with gusto. But being too good attracts vultures. On a tense day inside the train, a girl accused him of being a pervert, even though he was carrying junk in both hands. But since his appearance didn't help, the crowd embraced the girl's story, throwing Seeger into an abyss of injustice. Life doesn't forgive, and he swallowed the shame in silence. Later, the court even slapped him with a fine of 3,000 yen. He accepted just not to waste more time with that nonsense. He thought he was out of the hole, but it was just the beginning. He received a dismissal letter that felt like a blade stuck in his chest. Years later, the same girl plotted another trap, and he was arrested for defamation. Since she was a minor, she only got a warning. Seeger felt the indignation bubbling, but couldn't do anything. He tried to get a job and kept hitting closed doors. That face, which once was his bizarre trophy, became a burden. The trauma on the train shattered his mind. He locked himself in his room and disconnected from the world. When he realized it, 6 years had evaporated without a trace. The money was gone. He became a burden to his parents. Out of boredom, he surfed the internet, only coming across tragedies, until, amid the disasters, he saw a weird post. Someone claiming they had been transported to another world and became the king of the place. It was a kind of redemption for those in the mud. At first, he thought it was nonsense, but soon came the what if he did the ritual. Suddenly, boom, a screen appeared with the message, "Want to try your luck in another world? Click here." Returning to Earth would cost half his life. But since he had nothing to lose, he accepted without a second thought. He would return to being 16 years old, with attributes based on the amount of suffering he had endured. In that aspect, Seeger was practically a world champion. He gained a flood of points. He reduced his beauty to 255 for being so ugly, earning a bunch of bonuses. Understanding the system, he listed all possible defects in his description. He spent 19 of the 20 minutes just on that. In the end, with over 100 trillion accumulated strength points, he was sucked into the new world without even saying goodbye. When he opened his eyes, he was someone completely new. And the 255 beauty look even came out stylish. Not to be alone, he even arrived accompanied by 3 stunning colleagues. Seeing the blonde feeling cold, he showed his chivalry by offering his coat. Seeger even tried to get into the group's vibe, but was immediately rejected. There, he realized that even in another world, beauty still reigned. The others began to introduce themselves. All 16 years old, but the nearly 200-kilo frame of men completely stood out. They reported that they too had seen a mysterious post on the internet and decided to embark on this parallel journey. They invited Seeger to form a team, but he wasn't excited. He found a gold coin in a drawer and, trying to be discreet, attempted to grab it on the sly, but it evaporated instantly. He discovered he had written on his profile that he had no talent with money, so he couldn't even hold it. At the starting house, everyone received basic kits, and the magical clothes fit as if they had been made for the soul's core. There were only 7 coins to be divided among the 4. Our protagonist refused, since he couldn't even touch them. Jay accepted immediately, thinking he missed out because he got distracted staring at the girls. Seeger was interested in an axe, but it immediately sparked protest. A colleague apologized, saying that on Earth he was clumsy in conversations and always caused trouble unintentionally. Everyone there had faced pain and sought a new beginning. They decided by luck, with rock, paper, scissors, and he ended up with the crummiest staff. Tired of living on the margins, he swore to be the solo leveling style hero. "Me for myself, you all deal with your own stuff." He traded everything for over 100 billion ultra-broken points. When they set off toward the starting city, monsters ambushed them. Seiji went down right at the start, and more were still coming. Rizu and the other one had heavier weapons and held the front line. The girl with the bow, she couldn't even pull the string. She had burned it all on beauty and became dead weight. A monster attacked Seeger, and the pain was insane. He tried to use his absurd strength but forgot to distribute the points. When he killed one enemy and gained experience, boom, he jumped straight to level 31. He spread the remaining points evenly. He'd throw trillions at each attribute and then see what was worth it. At that point, he was practically a deity. The monsters attacked him, but it felt like a breeze. A snap of his fingers felt like detonating a city. He saw the archer still trying to tie the bow and decided to help. He pretended to have a compulsion for bowstrings. With 1 trillion in skill, he could turn any thief into a snack. The girl thought it was help for the bow and shot a random arrow into the sky. Result? A divine thunderbolt came down and wiped out everyone in the area. Luckily, more monsters kept coming, which extended the show. The archer, who could barely shoot, kept wasting arrows without hitting a single creature. There he went again, saving the girl and improvising arrows with dry branches. After the massacre, they headed to the starting city. Hungry, they went looking for food. Shigeru took the opportunity to try and disappear, following the lone wolf path. Even though the others were good people, he saw himself as a weed surrounded by flowers. Used to the smell of dog poop, he felt he didn't belong in that blooming garden. When he saw a stray cat, he thought of petting it, but remembered the curse. Touching a woman would cost him 10% of his life per second. The blunt archer girl suddenly showed up, startling him, but deep down she was nice and even bought him a cake. She wanted to thank him for helping with the bow. She said poor people shouldn't act proud and told him to accept it. With no other choice, he took the treat and unintentionally touched her hand. Bang! He took 58 trillion in damage, soul-shattering, enough to reset humanity 100 times. The girl burst into tears, devastated for having wasted money. Seeker mentally compared her to a god of destruction, but even so, apologized. Thankfully, back on Earth, he was a salesman and mastered the art of talk. He said she was so dazzling that it made him nervous to even touch. He used every gram of his natural salesman talent, with a transparent soul and a touch of sincerity. Seeger managed to reach the girl's heart, and even with the slightly questionable cake, decided to accept the gift with a sincere smile. His motto in his days as a salesman was always to spread joy and never disappoint anyone's expectations. Determined to share everything he had to uphold that, he grabbed the treat excitedly and devoured it with gusto. The girl, moved by the scene, immediately forgave him and even offered another piece, saying letting him eat just that would be pure cruelty. She also threw in an apology for being too beautiful and causing all that mess. Seeger heard it and even felt tired. If she already thinks she's all that, no point arguing. But deep down, she had noticed from the start that he was a nice guy. Besides helping with the bow, he even pretended to have found the arrow just to return it to her. He was truly touched by that recognition. At least this girl had awareness and wasn't one of those unbearable princess types. They sat down together and ate in a rare peace, and the vibe turned light, calm. Seeker ended up taken by a silent gratitude. He thought that, at the very least, he wanted to repay this gesture before disappearing and continuing his journey as a true lone wolf. But then, the other two buddies showed up all cheerful, calling him with affection and joy. Then he couldn't resist, had to accept their affection too. What else could he do, right? Immediately after that, Shigeru goes to a shop to acquire more arrows because she ran out of stock very quickly. She insists to the merchant, stating that she has sufficient funds to buy them, but he replies that her pouch is already full. Seiji is beside her, wanting to help, although he cannot reveal that he has the power to create arrows at will. Nevertheless, Shigeru persists in asking if he is not going to buy something, and he responds that he is penniless, completely broke. Upon leaving, Seiji and the others set out in search of an inn to stay overnight. Seika, noticing Shigeru's disastrous financial condition, decides to pay for his room. He tries to refuse, but she takes out her card and firmly asks if he wouldn't like to sleep in a comfortable bed, insinuating that if he refused, a girl would have to pay for it on his behalf. Without time to respond, she takes him by the hand and leads him to the inn. Despite the firmness, the touch is gentle, without causing any discomfort. Later, Shigeru reflects. He cannot remain there for long, because each day he accumulates even more debts with Seika and the others. He decides to seek a means of sustenance, even if that means reducing his income to a minimal fraction. Suddenly, an idea arises. The following morning, Seiji and the companions awake and find biscuits and other foods arranged on the table. Shigeru invites them to eat, explaining that he will not be able to consume everything alone. They are surprised, considering his lack of money. He then reveals that he used a technique that makes people want to help him. In fact, he crafted some arrows from sticks and swapped them for food in the barter system, instead of money. Seika, in turn, says that he does not need to beg for compassion because she is willing to help him. But Shigeru believes he has already repaid his debts to her, so he does not wish to stay any longer. While they finish eating, Seiji consults the map and concludes that they need to move on, take on new missions, and earn money. He mentions that the monsters they faced the previous day did not drop any rewards, so he plans to check out a nearby cave. Shigeru is impressed by Seiji's ability to make decisions when a rude man appears, offering his services as a guide to the cave. He introduces himself as Kayoshiro, claiming to be a reincarnated as well. Growing tense at Shigeru's stern expression, he asks if they were all recent arrivals. Seiji stands up cautiously to hear him better. Then, Kayoshiro pulls some green cards from his pocket, claiming that they are items found in the first wooden house, and that guarantee a lodging discount. He says that, even without the cards, she could deduct the entire stay. Shigeru panics. They did not find those cards, and Kayoshiro assures that he can redeem a total reimbursement even now. He hands them over, and Shigeru, still unbelieving, passes the cards to Seiji. Shigeru thinks that Kayoshiro seems more like someone exploiting newbies, although he is willing to let Seiji make the decision. Seiji weighs the risks and benefits, decides to hire him to guide them. After all, they need information and level acceleration. With that, Kayoshiro leads the group to the cave, where soon a band of goblins attacks them. Shigeru immediately begins firing arrows, but without hitting any target. Frustrated, Shigeru remarks that she seemed too determined, as if her arrows were worth a fortune. Although proud, the idea of high value puts her on alert, and then she hits a goblin with a precise shot. The team advances, and Shigeru is surprised to see that Kayoshiro is, in fact, a competent guide. Afterward, Kayoshiro instructs everyone on the correct use of their weapons, especially reprimanding Shigeru for acting impulsively. He then asks Shigeru if he does not wish to train, and he admits that he does not have suitable skills yet. Kayoshiro acknowledges the difficulty of evolving using only the staff, but encourages him, stating that the team's strength is truly incredible. Shigeru recalls when, in the forest, he encountered a giant orc and thought of testing his ultimate ability until the system warned him that such power would destroy everything within a 200-kilometer radius, sacrificing millions, and he canceled the action immediately. Kayoshiro advises that he be more active in combat, or he will be forced to retire, as he himself had to. Then, Kayoshiro shares his journey. He once belonged to a mercenary group, whose leader became king, and he had to withdraw. He praises the king, saying that he is level 80 with stats above 160, but for Shigeru, that is still weak. Finally, they arrive at the entrance of the cave, which resembles ancient ruins. The group cheers, but Seika shows apprehension. Upon entering, she observes the limestone stalactites and feels a chill. Kayoshiro warns her to keep her distance due to danger. Shigeru wonders if Seika is just a young girl, and when asking Seiji's age, he answers in a more careful tone that he was 30 in the other world, and Seika confesses that she is 17 in this reality and about to enter college. As Seiji comments on her studies, Shigeru realizes that Seika is at least intellectually brilliant. After this, they face monstrous bats, reach the boss room, and Shigeru learns to think before acting. Kayoshiro advises that she should not advance into the main hall alone, as she would die instantly, and she withdraws. Seiji thanks Kayoshiro for his help, who says he is ready to lead them. Before they leave, he announces a surprise. A safe space for newbies, where no monster or magic can reach them, with snacks and drinks, a celebration for the group. Shigeru immediately activates his substance detection ability and notices that the rims of the cans were imbued with a potent sedative. Luckily, Seiji stays alert and declines the offer. However, upon seeing Kayoshiro pretending to be injured and dejected, he feels guilty for distrusting his intentions and decides to accept the celebration. Shigeru, in turn, becomes frustrated with Seiji's unwavering kindness. Even so, everyone begins to eat and drink, while Shigeru tries to distract the group with conversation, using it as an opportunity to cast an antidote spell discreetly. He then asks about the lives each of them led before arriving here. The environment becomes silent. Shigeru understands that everyone there was fleeing from their realities, just like him. It is then that Seiji opens up and shares part of his story. He had dropped out of school out of boredom and founded his own company, called Successful Life. Shigeru remembers having visited that company once during a sales presentation and realizes that the CEO looked a lot like Seiji. Seiji also recalls. He says that a salesman approached him unannounced and tried to sell him an expensive copier. Despite the unusual approach, the man assured that he would make Seiji smile and never disappoint him. With those words, Seiji was moved and decided to let his employees run the company. The business prospered for a time until he chose to replace his team with artificial intelligence, which led the company to ruin. Sunk in regret, he felt he had thrown away the chance that salesman had given him. That is why, in this new world, he vowed never to disappoint anyone. And then he reveals that the name of that salesman was Shigeru, but the young, bulky, quiet man just disguises himself, pretending not to be him. Shortly after, everyone swoons under the effect of the sedative, and Kayoshiro returns with a group of criminals to capture them. However, Shigeru merely pretends to be unconscious, waiting for the right moment to act. The bandits begin to handcuff the group, but before he intervenes, Seiji stands up, demanding that they leave his friends alone. Kayoshiro laughs at the situation, certain that Seiji can barely stand, and orders his men to continue with the capture. Shigeru hesitates to act at that moment so as not to put Seiji in danger, but he sees him throw himself at the enemies, only to be violently thrown against the wall. Kayoshiro orders them not to harm the prisoners, as that would devalue the merchandise. Anger rises in Seiji. He says that everyone there had already been crushed by life, and upon finding a new chance, end up being betrayed by people like Kayoshiro. But Kayoshiro tells him to shut up and orders that he be taken away. That is when Shigeru decides to join the fight. Instead of using his stats, he leaps onto the enemies and knocks them down with the weight of his own body. He shouts for Seiji to take the girls and run, leaving the rest to him. But Seiji refuses to abandon him. He faces the bandits and says he can defeat them with a single blow. No one takes him seriously. The enemies run toward him, but Shigeru intercepts them, jumping and absorbing the weak attacks with his robust body, crushing them afterward. Kayoshiro orders his men to deal with the jumping pig first. Seiji insists that he flee, promising to handle the situation. The bandits attack Shigeru without causing real harm until one of them sticks his fingers into his nostrils. Suddenly, an intense light emanates from Seiji's hand. He orders them to recede because his light of truth will pierce any darkness. The criminals are stunned and ask what that ability is. Seiji explains. He made a solemn vow, carved on a special note, swearing never to abandon his friends. And if he ever failed, he would pay the price with his own soul. Because of that oath, he received skill bonuses, which he channeled into a special technique activated by his anger. He warns that this is their last chance to flee. But Kayoshiro mocks him, saying they will cut off his hand before he can attack. Shigeru decides to observe what Seiji can do. He positions himself as a shield in front of him and says that, although they are outnumbered, they must fight together. With that, Seiji unleashes his power, transforming into a form so imposing that even legendary heroes have never known. He stares down the enemies and declares, "Now, you will pay for your sins."